Thank you, choir. David Sedaris, an essayist and a humorist, when he was 41, moved to Paris and entered a school where he would learn French. And he tells of that in his book of essays, Me Talk Pretty One Day. And so one of those essays is about their conversation in that class, about celebrations, and about Easter in particular. So there was a Moroccan woman in the class, and she had never heard of Easter. She was Muslim. She said, I don't have any idea what you all are talking about. And so the teacher said, who can explain to this woman what Easter is all about? And of course, the teacher insisted that it be described in French. So 2 people took up the charge to the best of their ability. It is, said one, a party for the little boy of God who call himself Jesus, and, oh shoot, she faltered and her fellow countrymen came to her aid. He call himself Jesus, and then he die one day on 2 morsels of lumber. The rest of the class jumped in, offering bits of information that would have given the Pope an aneurysm. He died one day, and then he go above of my head to live with your father. He weared of himself the long hair, and after he died, the first day he came back here for to say hello to the peoples. He nice, the Jesus. He made the good things, and on the Easter, we be sad because somebody makes him dead today. Part of the problem has to do with vocabulary, doesn't it? Simple nouns such as cross and resurrection were beyond our grasp, he says, let alone the theological implications. So, faced with the challenge of explaining the cornerstone of Christianity, we did what any self-respecting group of people might do. We talked about food instead. The rabbit of Easter, he bring of the chocolate. So how do we translate Easter? How do we translate resurrection into a time and a culture 20 centuries later? I don't know the precise answer to that, but I think we could do a lot worse than starting where Mary Magdalene started in the gospel reading that Grace read for us this morning. What did she do? She just showed up. She was there. And it's become a truism over the past couple of decades, but that's okay, because for the centuries before that, we neglected the fact that it was women that showed up to the tomb on that Sunday morning. And in the Gospel of John, it was one woman. It was Mary Magdalene in tears because the friend, the one that she loved, was dead. Mary Magdalene was a person that was in a place of grief. She was in a place of sadness. Life didn't turn out the way that she had expected it to. The things that she thought were going to happen, the relationships that she thought might continue, didn't happen and didn't continue. And yet she shows up. Mary was a woman, and don't want to read too much from our time into that time, but she was a woman that lived in a male-dominated hierarchical structure. She was a woman that lived in a town in a nation that was occupied by a foreign power. Life, at least, doesn't seem to be great for her. And yet, she shows up. She's there. And as the story continues, Mary Magdalene is rewarded for that. She comes in contact with the risen Jesus. And I never noticed that before this week, but in the interaction in the Gospel of John, something just remarkable happens. There's a back and forth between Mary and this one that has risen. There's some miscommunication and misidentification, but all of a sudden the lights come on. And Mary says, Rabboni, teacher. And do you notice what Jesus does at that point? Up until that point, he had been calling her just woman. But his response to her then was Mary. It's like not only was Mary there looking for Jesus, but Jesus is the risen Christ, was there looking for Mary. I don't know the best way to translate Easter into our place in our time, but I think a really great translation of that is that love wins. There are times in our personal lives and in our world that just seem so dark. And we don't know which way to turn. We don't know how we're going to move forward. But what do? We show up. We wait. These times were particularly dark. The whole reason for Easter is that Jesus had been killed. He didn't just die, he was killed. If Jesus had lived to be 95 years old and had died a peaceful death on hospice care, we probably wouldn't be here this morning. Jesus was executed by the powers of his day. Jesus was executed seemingly just for showing compassion and challenging the systems of incompassion in his day and in his age. His friends, his disciples, thought that this was going to be the beginning of a new movement that would overthrow the Roman Empire and would change the world. But that was cut short in the activities of the week previous, when Jesus had been captured and executed on a cross by the Roman Empire. And yet Mary Magdalene continued to show up. She continued to be there. Eventually, she was able to drag the rest of the disciples along with her. And they all came to the realization that something had changed. Something was different. And timid disciples, scared even of their own shadow and what was happening in that time. Anything? There we go. Who were timid, who denied Jesus, all of a sudden became some of the greatest proclamators of good news that there is. And so, what might we do with that? no matter what circumstances we are in our lives. And I think again, we turn to Mary and we just show up. My guess is, and my knowledge is, looking at some of the faces and the people in this room, is there's really difficult circumstances that we're in. Facing illness, facing difficulties with loved ones, facing challenges in our career and in our life. And every day we wake up, and there's something else in the news, a different freedom that's been chipped away. State governments just trying to race to the bottom, it seems like, in how they treat the residents of their states. I think we have the opportunity to respond in the same way that Mary does. To show up, to wait for the risen Christ, to wait for the power of the divine. I think we do that by drawing close to the risen Christ. And you might say, Jason, you believe that stuff? And yes, I do believe that stuff. Like the gospel writers, we understand and experience that in different ways. But here's what I know, that there is a presence, there is a power that knows us better than we know ourselves. And on this morning that love wins, it's great to remember it's a presence, it's a power that maybe even loves us better than we love ourselves. It's a presence in all the ways that we understand that knows us, that calls us by name. Mary, Jason, Beth, Carol, Phil, and that calls us into a relationship of love, in a relationship of compassion. We draw close to that presence in our lives, and then in the amazing words of Wendell Berry, the farmer and the philosopher and the environmental activist and the poet, we practice resurrection. In his poem Manifesto, The Mad Farmer Liberation Front, which is just a great title itself, I can't read all of it, but listen to what he says. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbors and to die. And you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. So friends, every day, do something that won't compute. Love the Lord. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Go with your love to the fields, lie down in the shade, rest your head in her lap, swear allegiance to what is nighest your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection. I love that admonition. I love that challenge. And that is our opportunity. And folks, in the day and the age that we live in, that is our necessity. I came this close this morning to playing the words of Justin Pearson, and who knows if they would have played right anyway with the way things are going this morning. But I'm going to challenge you to go home and Google that and listen to it today. Justin Pearson was one of the state legislatures in Tennessee that was removed from office because he joined a protest on the floor of the legislature against gun violence. He and his black colleague were expelled from office. The white colleague was retained in office. His last words before that body were amazing. He rightly observed that it is Friday. Things look dark. We continue to be attacked from every side. He said, but the promise is this, that Sunday is coming. We are people of the resurrection. It is our opportunity to live into that. And I know that's difficult because it's so easy to hold on to the things that bind us. As we talked about a few weeks ago with Lazarus, sometimes we need a little bit of help unwrapping ourselves from the grave clothes. Parker Palmer, the author and the writer and the teacher, who's just given us just the most wonderful gift of describing his journey through depression in such a real and authentic way. And he said, one of the most difficult things was as I was coming through that and coming into that, he said one of the most difficult things was re-entering and re-engaging life again. To know that there were certain things that might be expected of me. To know that I now have the responsibility of serving others. Siblings in Christ, we have the responsibility of being people that practice resurrection. The good news is we don't do that alone. We do that in the presence of the one that knows our name and loves us. We do that in the presence of one another as we know one another's name and as we practice resurrection together. But as people that still show up to an Easter service on a Sunday morning, each of us is called to not just be people that hang on to Friday, but to realize that we are Sunday people, people of the resurrection. And it is in that love and it is that power that we act and we move. Let's pray together.